You don't actually struggle with confidence. You struggle with trusting your own voice. And I'm going to talk about the science today and why that is. My name is Crystal Hoban. I'm an intuitive identity coach, and I help people reclaim their voice, their power, and recognize the ways that they are self abandoning so they can come home to self. Let's get into it. Today, I want to focus on how we lose connection with ourselves. And when we lose connection with ourselves, we lose connection with our voice. Now, I mean our voice in regards to what we actually can say and feeling the comfortability of showing up authentically and speaking our truth. But I also mean being able to hear our inner voice. Have you ever noticed that the more that you disconnect from yourself and the more that you don't pay attention to your inner voice or listen to your inner voice or even use your actual voice, the harder it feels to do it? The harder it feels for you to actually hear your inner voice as well as speak up completely authentically, right? Without worry or fear. And I want to acknowledge that these are kind of like skills, right? So this reminds me of COVID. And when COVID happened, I was actually a therapist at the time. So I worked through the whole thing. And when COVID happened, many people started experiencing anxiety for the first time. They started feeling like super anxious and uncomfortable because the whole world slowed down and we were forced to kind of have to sit still. And that brought up a lot of thoughts for people, a lot of feelings for people, right? That they had never experienced before because we keep ourselves so busy that we don't experience these things, right? So there's a skyrocket in anxiety that happened around this time. And the other thing that I noticed as well is that a lot of relationships ended. They were very much tested in this time too, because those distractions were not there. And what I'm connecting to this is that kids were not in school at that time. And when they ended up going back to school, they had all this social anxiety, all this fear around being around other kids and having to talk to other kids and be in social settings, right? And I want to acknowledge that this comes from, and adults probably experience this too to some degree, but this comes from not practicing, right? Socialization is a skill. It's something that you have to practice to get better at. You have to practice to be good at it, right? When we just all of a sudden stop practicing something or we're not doing something on a regular basis, then anxiety is normal. We're going to have a hard time coming back to it in the way that we did, right? This is why you could start, I don't know, snowboarding maybe when you're younger and not feel anything about it because you've been doing it for so long. But then when you take time off and you go back to it, you're a little bit nervous, you're a little bit anxious the first time going down, right? Because it's a muscle that you haven't used in a little while. So this is true kind of with anything. And the more that we spend time away from practicing certain skills or doing certain things, the more we disconnect from that thing, the more anxiety we have about starting it up again, the more nervous we are about practicing it again. It's kind of a normal part of the process. And so I want you to think about and recognize that if you're somebody who has not been able to show up and speak your truth and just say what you mean without overthinking, without second guessing yourself, right? Without feeling like you have to perform or rehearse. This isn't something that just happened overnight. This is something that you slowly disconnected from over time to the point where now it feels very difficult. Now it feels very hard. So I kind of want you to think about, do you replay conversations after they've happened and think about what you said and how it was received? Do you overanalyze them? Do you struggle sometimes to say what you actually mean because you're trying to control how the other person receives it or how they feel about what you're saying? Do you need reassurance from the other person after expressing yourself that what you expressed is actually okay or not? Are you somebody who looks for that? Do you change how you speak depending on who you're around? I often call this like shape shifting, right? People pleasing is another way term for it, but it's this idea of in every environment or with every different person, you kind of show up a little bit differently. Maybe you don't say certain things or you're careful about what you say with certain people, right? And all of these are ways that you are kind of making yourself digestible for the other person. instead of just showing up authentically and fully as you are. So, I want to talk about some of the signs and what it looks like when you do not trust your voice. So, if you're somebody who constantly over explains in situations, so you feel like you need to constantly express yourself or over explain yourself, maybe you're asking for something or wanting something, and you have to explain why it's okay for you to have that, that's because a part of you doesn't trust your voice. If you're somebody who is constantly thinking about a conversation before it happens, so you're trying to say the right words, you're trying to think about how it's going to play out, you're trying to think about all the possible outcomes, right? You're rehearsing that conversation before it even happens. And sometimes you're also thinking about it after it's already happened and you can't stop thinking about it as well. And if it actually went well, right? Or how the other person was affected by it, or if you said the right thing, or if you could have said something different. That's another sign that you are disconnected from your voice. One of the bigger signs is that you fear confrontation. And part of that is because a part of you has this belief that having confrontation with somebody else or disagreeing with somebody else is a negative thing, which it's just a part of being human. I want to acknowledge that. But a lot of the times when we have not seen our parents fight before, right? Or we've seen fights get so crazy, aggressive, angry, and bad where somebody storms out or somebody leaves, right? We fear confrontation. And when we fear confrontation, then a part of us is always functioning from that nervous system space, right? So if we're afraid of confrontation or we're afraid of hard discussions or difficult discussions, then we're going to show up a little bit performy, I guess is the best way to put it. A little bit in a way of trying to make sure everything's going to be okay. So we don't show up saying what we actually mean. Oftentimes we soften our voice, we soften what we actually want to say, right? Maybe we don't share the whole truth of what we're thinking or feeling to keep it from escalating to the point where we don't want it to, right? But we're always going to function from that kind of nervous system capacity of being afraid of confrontation. So, because we're afraid of that and we're afraid of what could happen because of what we've witnessed or what we've seen or what we've experienced, right? That's going to affect how we show up and how comfortable we feel showing up and using our voice. So, if you're somebody who fears confrontation, you're probably avoidant in some ways, but that's more information that you're also disconnected from your voice. If you're somebody who struggles to make decisions, you're somebody who asks everybody else what they think you should do, right? Or I've seen this with clients before where they read every possible review before they buy something. And they'll read so many different products and so many reviews before they buy it, right? And that is partially because you're afraid of making the wrong decision. You don't trust your own inner voice, right? And that's where that is coming from. Another one is needing validation before actually taking action. So needing somebody to tell you that what you want to do is okay, or what you want to do is acceptable, or that what you want to do is fine, right? You're looking for somebody to tell you it's okay for you to make the decision that you want to make or that you feel like you want to make. And needing reassurance from something outside of yourself before making that, that's information that you're disconnected from your voice. You don't trust yourself to be able to usually make the right decision. Another one is feeling guilty for having needs. So feeling like you don't deserve to have certain needs or you can't ask for certain needs in relationships. Feeling guilty for having to do something to take care of yourself over prioritizing somebody else, right? That's information that you're not connected to your voice. Saying yes when you actually want to say no, right? There's a little bit of a people pleasing kind of way that this is showing up, this one, where you say yes because you don't want to upset the person, right? But as you continue to do that, and you actually want to say no, a part of you probably wants to say no because you don't have the emotional capacity or the physical capacity, but these are ways that we leave ourselves, right? And that's really what us not trusting our voice is about, is us leaving ourselves. Another one would be changing yourself to avoid rejection. So for somebody who's like a people pleaser, this could look like you're changing your interests or what you actually like so that you're compatible with somebody else, right? And the problem with this is that if you don't actually like that thing and you're changing what you like to match someone else to look compatible, you'll eventually be inconsistent with that person, right? You can't maintain something like that long term because it's not really who you are. It will work for as long as it works until it doesn't work, right? But then when you consistently are doing that with people, you start to forget what you actually like and who you actually are, right? And you kind of become the shell of a person, right? That you don't really know who you are anymore. And like I said, this is something that happens in little ways over time. Another one is feeling anxious about expressing yourself. So feeling like if I fully show up as who I am, I'll be seen as too much. I'll be seen as intense. I won't be liked, right? Those kinds of things are also you disconnecting from your voice because you're more worried about what everybody else is going to think about you rather than how you feel. And when you are moving into the space of trying to be someone who is connected to your voice, you're reclaiming your voice, you're reclaiming your identity, you're reclaiming your authentic self, right? You have to be able to be okay with the fact that you're not putting other people before yourself. That's probably one of the biggest things, is that most of us are putting others before ourselves, and that causes us to abandon ourselves so much and lose who we are. But when you're actually reclaiming your voice, reclaiming yourself and your own identity, right? And truly coming out as who you are, you're recognizing that you come first. That's one of the biggest shifts when it comes down to this. So one more that I'll mention here too is that a sign that you're disconnected from your voice is that you're constantly overthinking. You're overthinking text messages, you're overthinking conversations, right? Um, or you're constantly asking people if they're upset with you or angry with you. You're constantly needing reassurance to know if that things are okay. And that's coming from you not trusting yourself and being disconnected from who you are. I want to acknowledge that not trusting our voice is not a communication issue. This is a self-trust issue. And this usually happens because certain experiences we've had have been uncomfortable, have not felt good. We felt rejected, we felt abandoned, right? So, for example, maybe when we have expressed our truth or we told somebody how we really felt, we were emotionally dismissed by that other person. That other person told us we were too sensitive, we had too many feelings, we were too much, right? Maybe you were punished for being honest, so when you were honest with somebody and it hurt their feelings, they gave you the silent treatment. That's one way that it could look. It could also look like we grew up in environments where we felt constantly criticized or put down, or environments that were unpredictable or chaotic. And so being honest and being upfront is kind of scary because we never knew what to expect when we did that in those environments, right? Which will make us kind of more on guard or feel more unsafe doing that. Or maybe we are somebody who had to people please, to receive love, to receive attention, to get our needs met, right? So in that situation, expressing ourselves honestly is going to be uncomfortable. Our nervous system is going to feel like that's unsafe, right? Because when we did that, it was not received well. This could also look like us being misunderstood repeatedly. So when we did express our truth, we continuously felt misunderstood in that, right? Or felt like people weren't willing to understand where we were coming from or weren't willing to hear us out. Maybe we even learned that authenticity and being honest and telling our truth and our feelings caused conflict. And so we became conflict avoidant, right? Or we learn that it is our responsibility to take care of others over ourselves, right? So we've learned to prioritize others' comfort and needs over our own truth. So because of these different things that I just mentioned, right? These different things are how you learn to survive. And you learn to survive by abandoning yourself, by not being in touch with your voice, by not being fully expressed in who you are. You had to survive. And there is a point in time where that is helpful, and there is a point in time where that works. And then there's a point in time in adulthood that most of us reach where it actually begins to hold us back and it begins to cause us to stunt our growth. There are many different costs that you have to losing your voice. And some of those costs are feeling extremely anxious in relationships, feeling really uncertain and overwhelmed in relationships, even emotionally overwhelmed, having a lot of resentment towards other people, feeling like other people don't care about you in the way that you care about them, experiencing extreme emotional exhaustion in relationships to the point where you probably avoid being around people or engaging with people because it's so exhausting or tiring. And a lot of the times that's because you're performing or needing to perform to be in spaces and having to be on all the time. That is exhausting. This also comes with a loss of identity. You don't really know who you are anymore. You are whatever other people need you to be, not who you truly are, right? You lack confidence in yourself. And that's just a part of this process that happens. You feel disconnected from who you are because you have to be who other people need you to be, not who you are. So as you choose that over and over again, you become more disconnected from yourself. You attract relationships where you have to remain silent, or you're a peacekeeper, or where you have to perform a certain way to keep things cool and calm, right? And you will continuously attract those things in. And the other last thing that comes with the cost of you losing your voice is that you have difficulty trusting your own decisions. You might not even know what your decisions are, and you probably don't even know how to make them. You ask everybody else what their opinion is and what they think before you feel like you can make a decision or should make a decision. And a lot of the times this breaks down into you feeling afraid to make the wrong decision. And that's you still basing this off of what everybody else thinks rather than what you think. And these are the true cost of being disconnected from your voice. So some of the ways that rebuilding trust with yourself looks like is you being able to know what you feel and what you think, and being able to be aware of that, being able to identify that, not attached to anything about what anybody else thinks you should know or think or feel, but how you truly think and feel without needing others to inform you of that or tell you what that is for yourself. Learning how to speak before you are fully ready, learning how to start putting effort in and trying and learning, right? And that means working through these feelings of being wrong or doing it the wrong way or being imperfect. This is about letting yourself have needs, letting yourself recognize that you deserve needs and that you deserve to take care of your own needs, and it's okay for you to have needs. And in relationships, it is also okay for you to have needs. This also, to build self-trust, you need to work on not performing and editing yourself, filtering yourself so much, learning how to just let yourself flow instead of having to overthink what you're going to say or say it perfectly or make sure it lands right. And learning how to be emotionally safe internally, right? Because when you are practicing and learning and doing these things to build self-trust, you have to know how to regulate yourself through them so that you can expand your capacity for these things. If you don't know how to do that, then everything will collapse and you will go backwards. So that's actually a very important part in peace. So I want you to acknowledge that confidence is built not by making everybody else comfortable, but by staying connected to yourself no matter what. And this is exactly why I created my program. When we trust ourselves, we don't have this line of issues. We don't feel afraid of someone leaving us. We don't feel afraid of someone not liking us because we like us and we know that that's what's important, right? We trust ourselves and we know that what is meant for us will always be. And so when you do the work to actually come into who you fully are and accept who you fully are, then when people don't accept you or don't like you for that, you just see that as something that is not aligned. Not that there's anything wrong with you, right? I think that's one of the bigger things here is that a lot of the times when someone doesn't like us or we upset somebody, we then make meaning of it and the story about how we're not worthy or how we did something wrong or we must be bad, right? when the reality is that person is just not aligned to you, and that's okay. You're not going to be aligned with everybody, right? There's an acceptance that happens within the space. And I want to acknowledge that, this is the bulk of the work that I do in my program with people is I help them to be able to rebuild the self-trust and the confidence that they need. That's actually what the first month is all about. It's about you learning how to reconnect with yourself and you understanding the ways that you are leaving yourself or abandoning yourself for connection so that you can start to stop doing that because you can't actually become fully expressed in who you are if you're still abandoning yourself. So first you have to be able to recognize what are the ways that I'm doing this, right? And what are the things that I actually need to shift and stop doing so that I can start to build the self-trust and confidence. And we start in small little ways and we take action in small little ways. My whole program is very much about embodiment because I recognize that you can know all of these things, but if you're not actually integrating it and doing the nervous system work, then you're not going to be able to actually shift that identity. You're not going to be actually able to make that change, right? There's certain things that need to happen here. You could read all of the self-help books that you want, but you're not going to be able to actually make that change unless you can integrate it, unless you can embody it, and unless you can build the capacity to hold it, right? Which is the nervous system work. And so a lot of this work is rebuilding self-trust, and confidence builds with that when self-trust has become grounded and there's a foundation there. And then learning how to emotionally regulate yourself and take care of your emotions, learning what you need, learning about what makes you feel good, right? So that you're not actually like expecting other people to give that to you all the time. That's something you learn how to give yourself. Because when we learn how to give ourselves what we actually need instead of expecting other relationships to, first off, it takes the pressure off the relationships and the other people, but it also keeps us from being affected by those relationships. So every time we ask for something and we don't get it from someone else, right? We know how to give that back to ourselves. So therefore, they can't affect our mood. They can't affect our self-trust. They can't affect our worth, right? Not in the way that they can if we don't know what those things are and we're expecting other people to give them to us, right? So that's a big part of the program and a big part of understanding that if you want to stop overthinking relationships, if you want to stop saying yes when you actually mean no, if you want to reconnect with your voice and reconnect with your authenticity, this is a big part of that process. It's learning who you are and becoming the master of yourself, right? So learning how to express yourself without feeling guilty expressing yourself, learning to ask for your needs without feeling guilty doing so, learning that you deserve those things, recognizing that you are worth those things, and being able to regulate your nervous system as you are making these changes and moving through these things so you can build the capacity to be able to maintain this shift and change. That's the big part of my program, right? Because once you have a secure relationship with yourself, that will then happen externally for you. But a lot of the times, the reasons why we don't have secure relationships with other people and we feel insecure in relationships and we're constantly anxious in relationships is because you have that same relationship with yourself. So if you change that relationship with yourself, then it will change for you externally. And I think that's something that a lot of people just don't understand. And, I know this because I base this program off of my own work that I've done for myself. After my spiritual awakening, I had to really acknowledge and recognize that I was trying to get all of my needs met by friends and family members and everybody outside of myself. And it put so much pressure on my relationships. And not only that, but when they didn't meet me there, I was devastated. I was depressed. And what I had to learn was how to actually build that internally for myself and give that to myself. Because not only did it take the expectations away from what I had expected the relationship to give me, but it helped me to be able to feel safe and comfortable no matter what, no matter how they responded or reacted to me. Because I knew that I could always take care of myself and I would be okay no matter what. And that changes everything. So that's exactly the work that I do in my program, Fully Expressed and Unavailable for Less. The strongest voice that you will ever have is the one that no longer needs permission to exist. And so much and so many of us are constantly looking for permission to others to feel okay, to feel happy, to show up fully. And that's something that you need to learn to give yourself. That's something that I teach people on how to give themselves. That's something I have learned to give myself. Because when you are able to give yourself permission and you stop expecting anything outside of yourself to give it to you, that's when you become truly powerful. And that is when you become unstoppable. So if you'd like more information about my program, Fully Expressed and Unavailable for Less, or any of the coaching offerings that I have, you can go to crystalclearmystic.com.